"Look at this trash!" the man spat, his voice dripping with that specific kind of expensive, high society venom. "She thinks because she's breathing my air she belongs in my lobby? Get her out, now!" You think you know what injustice looks like? You think you know what regret tastes like? You have no idea. Imagine the arrogance it takes to put your hands on a woman just because of a hoodie and the color of her skin. Now imagine the moment that arrogance turns to ice in your veins. Because that woman being dragged across the marble floor like a rag doll? She isn't a vagrant, she isn't a criminal, and when her bag rips open and that gold shield hits the tiles with the heavy clatter of doom, the silence that follows is louder than a gunshot. This isn't just a mistake, it's an execution of a career. And karma? Oh, karma brought backup. The air inside the grand lobby of the Sovereign Capital Bank was always set to a crisp 68 degrees, a temperature designed to keep the patrons comfortable and the riffraff moving. It smelled of lemon pledge, old money, and the quiet, suffocating pressure of judgment. Zena Beckett stood near the entrance, adjusting the cuff of her oversized, charcoal gray hoodie. She was tired. It was a bone-deep exhaustion that settled into her marrow, the kind that came after a 72-hour stakeout in a cramped van in the humid, sprawling docks of New Orleans. She hadn't slept. She hadn't showered in 2 days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy, utilitarian bun, and her eyes, usually sharp and golden brown, were hidden behind dark aviator sunglasses. She looked, to the untrained eye, like a shadow. Someone who existed on the periphery of society. She wasn't there to make friends. She was there to access Safety Deposit Box 404. It contained a jump drive, evidence vital to the RICO case she was building against the Donovan crime family. It was a simple errand. In and out. No waves. But waves were often created not by the wind, but by the rocks that refused to move. Felix Sinclair stood behind the mahogany counter of the manager's station, watching Zena with the intensity of a hawk spotting a field mouse. Felix was a man who prided himself on the crease of his trousers and the pedigree of his watch. He was the branch manager, a title he wore like a crown. To Felix, the bank was his kingdom, and appearances were the law. "Dalton," Felix murmured, not taking his eyes off Zena. Officer Dalton, the bank's primary security detail, stepped up beside him. Dalton was a thick-necked man, his uniform straining at the biceps, his hand resting casually, almost eagerly on his belt. He was a man who had failed the police academy entrance exam twice before settling for private security, and the chip on his shoulder was visible from orbit. "Sir?" Dalton asked, his voice a low rumble. "The glitch by the door," Felix said, curling his lip. "She's been standing there for 30 seconds. She's casing the place, or she's looking for a handout. Either way, she disrupts the aesthetic." Zena finally moved. She walked toward the teller line. Her movements were fluid, deliberate, lacking the hesitant shuffle of the indigent. But Felix didn't see that. He only saw the hoodie. He saw the worn sneakers. He saw a black woman in a space he believed belonged to suits and ties. She approached the counter where a young woman with terrified eyes and a name tag reading Kira Mercer stood. Kira looked up, her smile faltering as she took in Zena's appearance, then flickering back to a trained customer service mask. "Good morning," Zena said. Her voice was raspy from lack of use over the last 2 days. "I need to access a safety deposit box. Number 404. Kira blinked. Do you have the key and identification, ma'am?" Zena reached into the front pocket of her hoodie. It was a sudden movement, perhaps a bit too fast for a high-tension environment, but Zena was running on caffeine and adrenaline fumes. Before her hand could resurface, a heavy hand clamped down on her shoulder. The pressure was immediate and disrespectful. Zena didn't flinch, but her body went rigid. It was a trained response. Muscle memory calculated the threat instantly. Male, approximately 220 pounds, right-handed grip, Poor leverage. That's enough, Dalton's voice boomed. Zena slowly turned her head. She didn't remove her sunglasses. Remove your hand. The lobby went silent. The scratch of pens, the hum of the ATM, the low murmur of conversations, it all died. Dalton laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. I don't think you understand how this works, sweetheart. You're lost. The shelter is 3 blocks east. I'm not lost, Zena said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously calm. And I'm not asking you again. Take your hand off me. Felix Sinclair rounded the counter then, stepping into the lobby floor like a judge descending from the bench. He adjusted his silk tie, his face pinched in a look of profound distaste. Is there a problem here, Dalton? Felix asked, though he knew the answer. He looked at Zena, not at her, but through her. Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We have a strict dress code and conduct policy for our clients. I am a client, Zena said, her hand still in her pocket, clutching the key. And I have business here. I highly doubt that, Felix sneered. He looked around the lobby, performing for the audience of wealthy patrons. We don't cater to street-level transactions. If you need to cash a welfare check, there's a liquor store on 5th. A few customers chuckled. A man in a tan suit shook his head in disgust. The humiliation was thick, tangible, designed to make her shrink. But Zena didn't shrink. She grew. She squared her shoulders, shaking off Dalton's hand with a sharp twist of her torso. The move was technical, precise. Dalton stumbled back a step, his ego bruised more than his hand. You have 5 seconds to apologize and let me access my box, Zena said. Dalton's face turned a violent shade of red. He reached for his baton, not unholstering it, but gripping it as a threat. You put your hands on me? You assault a security officer? I removed a threat from my personal space, Zena countered. She looked at Felix. Mr. Sinclair, is it? Your name is on the placard. I suggest you call off your dog before this situation becomes something you can't undo. Felix's eyes narrowed. He hated being challenged. He especially hated being challenged by someone he deemed beneath him. Get her out of here, Dalton. Drag her out if you have to. I want her trespassed. Call the police. I am the police, Zena began, but she didn't get to finish. Dalton lunged. It wasn't a tactical takedown. It was a brawl move. He grabbed the fabric of her hoodie and yanked. Zena, trying to de-escalate without severely injuring a civilian guard, allowed herself to be pulled off balance rather than breaking his wrist. She stumbled back, her sneakers squeaking against the polished marble. You want to play rough? Dalton growled, emboldened by Felix's nod. Let's go. Don't do this, Kira, the teller, whispered, her hands over her mouth. She has a key. I saw the key. Quiet, Kira, Felix snapped. She probably stole it. Zena regained her footing, her hands up, palms open. Officer, stand down. I am authorizing you to stand down. You don't authorize Jack, Dalton shouted. He grabbed her arm again, twisting it behind her back with excessive force. Pain shot through Zena's shoulder, an old rotator cuff injury flaring up, but she bit back the cry. She was a weapon wrapped in cotton, but she couldn't unleash. Not here. Not with civilians watching. If she hurt him, the narrative would be violent vagrant attacks guard. She needed to reveal her status, but he had her pinned against the velvet ropes. Last warning, Zena gritted out through clenched teeth. Shut up! Dalton shoved her forward. Felix smirked, crossing his arms. Trash, he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. And that was it. The fuse was lit. The physical sensation of being dragged is disorienting. It defies the laws of dignity. Zena felt the marble floor rush beneath her feet as Dalton shoved her, then pulled, then shoved again. He wasn't just escorting her, he was manhandling her. He wanted to hurt her. He wanted to break her spirit before he threw her to the curb. "Stop resisting!" Dalton yelled for the cameras, though Zena was barely moving, letting him expend his energy. "I'm not resisting," Zena said calmly, though her heart was hammering against her ribs, not from fear, but from rage. Cold, calculated rage. Dalton grabbed the back of her neck, his fingers digging into the sensitive skin there. That was a mistake. That was a lethal force trigger. Zena's instincts screamed at her to drop her weight, sweep his leg, and drive an elbow into his trachea. It would end the fight in 2 seconds. But she saw the phones. 3 teenagers by the ATM were recording. An old woman near the loan officer's desk was holding up her iPad. Let them see, Zena thought. Let them see exactly who he is. "Get her out!" Felix shouted, clapping his hands as if shooing a pigeon. "And check her pockets. She probably lifted a pen or two." Dalton swept Zena's legs out from under her. It was dirty, unnecessary, and brutal. She hit the ground hard, her hip taking the brunt of the impact against the unforgiving stone floor. The breath left her lungs in a sharp whoosh. "Get up!" Dalton screamed, immediately contradicting his action of throwing her down. Zena rolled onto her back, her sunglasses skittering across the floor. Her eyes were exposed now, burning, intense, and terrified of nothing. She looked up at Dalton, and for a split second the security guard faltered. He saw something in those eyes that didn't match the victim narrative he'd constructed. He saw a predator looking at prey, but his adrenaline was too high to process it. He reached down and grabbed the strap of her messenger bag, a worn canvas tactical bag that she carried everywhere. "Give me the bag!" he shouted. "Do not touch that bag!" Zena warned, her voice cutting through the noise like a razor blade. "That is federal property!" "Federal property?" Felix laughed, a high, mocking sound. "Listen to her! She's delusional, probably high on something. Check the bag, Dalton. Ensure she hasn't stolen bank assets." Dalton yanked the bag. Zena held onto the strap. "Let go!" Dalton put his boot on Zena's thigh to brace himself and pulled with all his might. The sound of tearing fabric was sickeningly loud. The canvas gave way. The buckle snapped. The contents of the bag exploded outward, raining down onto the pristine white marble of the Sovereign Capital Bank lobby. It was like slow motion, a half-eaten protein bar, a spare magazine for a Glock 19 loaded with hollow points, a pair of handcuffs, a thick manila folder stamped classified, and then the object that sucked the oxygen out of the room. A leather wallet flipped open as it hit the floor, sliding 10 feet and coming to a rest right at the tips of Felix Sinclair's polished Italian Oxfords. The gold badge caught the overhead halogen lights. It gleamed with an authority that transcended bank managers and rent-a-cops. The eagle, the shield, the bold blue letters engraved into the metal. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Below it, the ID card faced up. It featured a photo of Zena, clean-cut, in a suit, staring sternly at the camera. And the text, Special Agent in Charge. Zena Beckett Organized Crime Division. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, and total. The teenagers stopped giggling. The man in the tan suit stood up. Kira, the teller, gasped loudly, her hand flying to her chest. Felix Sinclair looked down. He blinked. He blinked again. His brain refused to process the information. It was a cognitive dissonance so strong it nearly gave him a stroke. The trash on the floor was a high-ranking federal agent. Dalton, panting, looked at the gun magazine on the floor, then at the badge, then at Zena. His face drained of color so fast, it looked like he'd been bled out. Zena didn't scramble. She didn't shout. She slowly pushed herself up to a sitting position. She brushed a speck of dust off her sleeve. She reached out, picked up her sunglasses, and slid them back onto her face. Then she stood up. She didn't look tired anymore. She looked 10 feet tall. "Officer Dalton?" Zena said. Her voice was conversational, terrifyingly light. You have exactly 3 seconds to step away from my evidence before I add obstruction of justice and tampering with federal evidence to the assault charges I'm already writing in my head. Dalton took a step back, his hands shaking. I didn't... 1, Zena counted. Dalton dropped the torn strap of the bag as if it were burning hot. He backed away, his baton clattering to the floor. Zena turned her head slowly toward Felix. The manager was frozen, staring at the badge at his feet. "And Mr. Sinclair," Zena said. Felix looked up, his arrogance replaced by a raw, naked terror. "Pick it up," Zena commanded. Felix squeaked. "Pick up my badge." Felix Sinclair bent down. His knees popped, his expensive suit strained. He reached out with trembling fingers and touched the leather wallet. He picked it up as if it were a holy relic or a live grenade. He held it out to her, his hand shaking so violently the badge rattled. Agent Beckett," Felix stammered. "I had no idea. You were dressed." Zena snatched the badge from his hand. She didn't put it away. She held it up, flashing it to the entire room, turning in a slow circle so every camera phone could catch the glint. "I was dressed like a citizen," Zena said, her voice projecting to the back of the room. "I was a customer. Is that your policy, Mr. Sinclair? Constitutional rights are determined by the thread count of a hoodie?" No, of course not." Felix waved his hands frantically. "It was a misunderstanding, a terrible misunderstanding. Dalton told me you were aggressive." "You throw him under the bus now?" Dalton yelled, panic making him turn on his master. "You told me to drag her. You said she was trash." "I never said that," Felix lied, sweat beading on his forehead. "Everybody heard you," the man in the tan suit spoke up. He stepped forward. "I heard you. I have it on video." Zena looked at the man and nodded once in thanks. Then she reached into her pocket, the other pocket, and pulled out her phone. She didn't dial 911. She hit speed dial number 1. She put the phone to her ear, staring dead into Felix's eyes. "Bradford," a deep voice answered on the first ring. "You in the box yet?" "No," Zena said. "I'm on the floor of the lobby. I've been assaulted by security. The bank manager denied me access and ordered the assault. My cover is blown. My evidence is scattered across the floor." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a pause that promised violence. "Are you injured?" Orion Bradford asked. His voice was low, dangerous. "Minor," Zena said, "but I have a hostile environment. I need the scene secured, now." "ETA 2 minutes. Don't let them leave. If they move, shoot them." The line went dead. Zena lowered the phone. She looked at Dalton, who was inching toward the exit. "Orion Bradford is the assistant director of the regional field office," Zena informed them. "He says if you move, I should shoot you." She pulled her jacket aside to reveal the holster clipped to her waistband. The firearm remained holstered, but the threat was unmistakable. "I'm inclined to follow orders." Dalton froze. "I'm sorry, lady, I'm sorry, I have kids." "So do a lot of people, you bully," Zena said coldly. "Sit down, on the floor, now." Dalton sank to the floor, his head in his hands. Felix tried to rally. He tried to find a shred of his old authority. "Now see here, Agent Beckett. I know the mayor. I play golf with the police commissioner. We can resolve this quietly. I can offer you a customized account? No fees? Perhaps a donation to the FBI Widows Fund?" Zena stepped into his personal space. She smelled the fear on him. It smelled sour, cutting through his cologne. "You tried to buy me?" Zena whispered. "Felix, you are currently the subject of a federal money laundering investigation involving the Donovan crime family. I was here to get the proof that links you to the accounts." Felix's face went slack. "What? Why do you think I was dressed like this?" Zena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I wanted to see if you'd let me in, if you were sloppy, and you were. You were so busy looking at my clothes, you didn't notice I clocked the erratic timing on the vault sensors. You didn't notice I saw you text Domino Donovan the moment I walked in. I didn't. We have your phone tapped, Felix, Zena said. But the assault? That's just the cherry on top. That makes this personal. Suddenly, the glass doors of the bank burst open. It wasn't the polite opening of automatic doors. They were thrown wide. 4 men in tactical vests marked FBI stormed in. Leading them was Orion Bradford. He was a mountain of a man, sharp-featured, wearing a suit that cost more than Felix's car, but wearing it like armor. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow and eyes that could freeze water. "Secure the exits!" Orion barked. "Nobody leaves! Phones down, people! This is a federal crime scene!" Orion marched straight to Zena. He didn't ask if she was okay. He grabbed her chin, tilting her head to inspect the bruise forming on her cheekbone where she hit the floor. He let go, turning to Felix. Felix shrank back. Orion Bradford was terrifying. He was pure, distilled authority. "Who did this?" Orion asked Zena, his voice deceptively calm. Zena pointed a finger at Dalton, then at Felix. The muscle and the mouth. Orion looked at Felix. He smiled. It was a wolf's smile. "Mr. Sinclair," Orion said, adjusting his cuffs, "you have the right to remain silent. But I really hope you don't. Because I want to hear you explain why you dragged a federal agent across your lobby before I throw you in a hole so deep the sunlight will be a memory." Orion turned to the agents. "Cuff him, and cuff the guard. Use the tight ones." As the agents swarmed Felix, who was now sobbing, Zena knelt down and began gathering her scattered belongings. Her protein bar was crushed. Her file was dirty, but the badge was clean. She picked up the magazine and slid it into her pocket. She looked up to see Kira, the teller, watching her with awe. "I'm sorry," Kira whispered. "You tried to help," Zena said softly. "I heard you. You're the only one in this building keeping your job today." Zena stood up, dusting off her hands. The first act was over. But the nightmare for Felix Sinclair was just beginning. And unbeknownst to Zena, the Donovan family had just been alerted that their inside man was down. The interrogation room at the FBI field office was soundproof, sterile, and cold, colder even than the bank lobby had been. But for Felix Sinclair, the temperature wasn't the problem. The problem was the crushing weight of his own choices pressing down on him. He sat at a metal table, handcuffed to a steel ring bolted to the floor. His expensive Italian suit, now rumpled and stained with sweat, looked like a costume for a play that had been canceled. He had been stripped of his tie, his shoelaces, and his dignity. On the other side of the one-way mirror, Zena Beckett stood with her arms crossed. She had changed out of the torn hoodie and into her standard operational attire. Dark, tactical pants, a fitted black shirt, and her badge clipped visibly to her belt. She held an ice pack to her cheekbone, where a purple bruise was beginning to bloom in angry contrast to her skin. "He's terrified," Orion Bradford said, standing beside her. He was watching Felix twitch on the monitor. "Heart rate is 140. He keeps checking his watch, even though we took it." "He's not checking for the time," Zena murmured, her eyes fixed on the man who had dragged her like garbage. "He's checking for his expiration date. He knows who he works for. He knows what happens when you fail the Donovans." "You think he'll talk?" "He's a coward, Orion. Cowards always talk when the alternative is pain. But we have to make him believe we're the safer option. And right now, I don't think he believes that." Zena pushed off the wall and opened the heavy door. The sound of the latch clicking made Felix jump so hard his chair skidded against the floor. She walked in and sat down opposite him. She didn't say a word. She just placed a tablet on the table between them and pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed by one of the teenagers in the lobby. It showed everything. The sneer on Felix's face, the way Dalton kicked Zena's legs out, the sound of the bag ripping, and then the collective gasp of the room as the badge hit the floor. But it was the comments scrolling beneath the video that Zena wanted him to see. "Fire this guy into the sun." Sovereign Capital Bank supports assaulting women? Hashtag boycott Sovereign? I know this guy, Felix Sinclair. He's a pretentious jerk. Glad he's done. Hope he likes prison food. Zena paused the video on a freeze frame of Felix's terrified face staring at her badge. 3 million views in 2 hours, Felix, Zena said softly. You're trending globally. Twitter, TikTok, national news. Even my mother in Chicago saw it. She's very upset. Felix swallowed hard. I can issue a public apology. I can resign. I didn't know. Stop lying. Zena slammed her hand on the table. The sharp crack made Felix flinch. I don't care about your apology. I don't care about your job. You lost that the moment you let your prejudice override your survival instincts. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. I know you texted Domino Donovan when I walked in. I know you flagged my account access not because I looked like a vagrant, but because Box 404 is the kill switch for his laundering operation. You weren't protecting the bank's aesthetic, Felix. You were protecting a mob boss. Felix's face turned ashen. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know any Donovans. We have the text logs, Zena lied effortlessly. They didn't have the content yet, just the metadata, but Felix didn't know that. We know he pays you 10 grand a month to wash his cash through shell accounts. We know you're the gatekeeper. I want a lawyer, Felix stammered. I have a right to a lawyer. You do, Zena agreed. She stood up and walked to the door. But here's the thing, Felix. If you call a lawyer, Kensington shows up. You know Kensington, right? The Donovan's fixer. Felix stopped breathing. If Kensington walks through that door, Zena continued, he isn't coming to get you out on bail. He's coming to make sure you never testify. He'll have you released, and by tonight, you'll be a tragic suicide statistic found in a Motel 6. She opened the door. But hey, it's your right. I'll go call him for you. Wait! Felix screamed, straining against the cuffs. Wait, don't call Kensington! Zena paused, her hand on the doorknob. She turned back slowly. Then talk to me. Tell me everything. Where is the ledger? How does Domino move the money? Felix was weeping now, ugly, terrified sobs. He'll kill me. You don't understand. Domino, he doesn't leave loose ends. He can't touch you in federal protection, Zena said. But you have to give me something to trade. Right now, you're just a viral villain. Make yourself a witness. Felix took a shuddering breath. The ledger, it's not in the box. The box is a decoy. It's digital. It's on a server in the Caymans. But the access key, the biometric key. Where is it, Felix? It's Domino's ring, Felix whispered. The signet ring he wears. It has an NFC chip. You need the ring to access the accounts. Zena looked at the mirror. She knew Orion was smiling. Thank you, Felix, she said. You just bought yourself a life raft. Don't puncture it. High above the city, in a penthouse that looked down on the scurrying ants of humanity, Domino Donovan swirled a glass of 1942 tequila. The room was dark, lit only by the city lights and the massive flat-screen television on the wall. On the screen, the news was playing the clip on a loop. FBI agent assaulted at Sovereign Capital Bank. Manager in custody. Domino was a handsome man in a terrifying way. He had the kind of symmetry that made people uneasy and eyes that looked like black glass. He wasn't angry. Anger was a waste of energy. He was disappointed. Sloppy, Domino said to the empty room. Amateur hour. In the corner, a figure shifted. Kensington, a lawyer with a suit that cost more than most people's education, stepped into the light. He was holding a tablet. The exposure is significant, Mr. Donovan, Kensington said, his voice smooth and oily. Sinclair is in federal custody. The Bureau has him. Agent Beckett is the lead. She's persistent. She's a problem, Domino corrected. She was in the lobby. She was going for the box. The box is empty, Kensington noted. She doesn't know that. But Felix knows where the real bodies are buried. And Felix has the spinal column of a jellyfish. He'll break. He's probably singing right now. Domino took a sip of his tequila. We need to prune the branch. Sinclair is inside the federal building, Kensington warned. Getting to him there is expensive and messy. I don't care about messy, Domino said. I care about silence. If Felix talks, he gives them the structure. If they get the structure, they freeze the assets. If the assets freeze, the cartel down south gets impatient. And when they get impatient, they don't sue me, Kensington. They skin me. He turned to the other shadow in the room, a man who had been so still he looked like a statue. Grayson. Grayson wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a banker. He was a scalpel. He was the man you called when you needed a problem to cease existing. He wore tactical gear like a second skin and had a face that no one ever remembered, which was his greatest asset. Grayson, Domino said, Felix is being moved. The feds won't keep him at the field office overnight. They don't have the long-term holding facilities for a high-risk witness. They'll move him to the detention center or a safe house. Route A or Route B, Grayson said. His voice was like grinding stones. Doesn't matter. Find him. End him. Domino paused, then smiled. And the agent? Beckett? Collateral? Grayson asked. No, Domino said. Message. Make it look like an accident if you can. If not, make it look like war. I want the FBI to know that coming after me has a cost. Kensington cleared his throat. Sir, killing a federal agent brings heat. Massive heat. The heat is already here, Kensington, Domino snapped, throwing his glass against the wall. It shattered, tequila raining down like amber shards. They dragged a black woman through a bank lobby, and she turned out to be the one person hunting me. Do you think they're going to stop? No, we have to break their resolve. He looked back at Grayson. Go! Burn it down! Grayson nodded once and vanished into the hallway. Domino adjusted his cufflinks, one of which was the heavy gold signet ring on his right hand. The key to the kingdom. Karma, Domino muttered, looking at the city below. Karma is a myth poor people tell themselves to feel better about being weak. Power is the only truth. But Domino Donovan was about to learn that karma wasn't a myth. She was driving an armored SUV, and she was very, very pissed off. The transport convoy was small to avoid drawing attention. Two black SUVs, Xena and Orion, were in the lead vehicle, with Felix Sinclair sandwiched between them in the back seat. Two tactical agents were in the front. The second SUV followed close behind with 4 more heavily armed agents. It was raining, a heavy torrential downpour that turned the city streets into slick mirrors of neon light. I don't feel good, Felix moaned. He was wearing a bulletproof vest over his ruined suit. I feel like I'm going to throw up. Swallow it, Orion said, not looking up from his tablet. You vomit in my car? You clean it up. Xena watched the rain streak against the window. She had a bad feeling, the kind that made the hair on her arms stand up. It was too quiet. The route to the safe house took them through the industrial district, a maze of warehouses and narrow underpasses. It was a choke point. Change the route, Xena said suddenly into her comms. Driver, take the next right. Go through the residential sector. That adds 10 minutes, Agent Beckett, the driver replied. I don't care. Do it. Belay that, Orion said. We stick to the plan. Changing routes on the fly introduces variables we can't control. Orion, this feels wrong, Xena insisted. The underpass is a kill box. We're 3 minutes out. We're fine. Felix whimpered. She's right. Domino knows the routes. He has people in traffic control. He has people everywhere. Orion looked at Felix, then at Xena. He saw the intensity in her eyes. He trusted her gut more than he trusted the protocol. Driver, Orion barked. Hard right, now. The driver spun the wheel. The heavy SUV swerved, tires screeching on the wet pavement, narrowly missing a median strip as they peeled off the main avenue onto a side street. Boom. The explosion shook the ground. Behind them, the underpass, they were seconds away from entering, erupted in a fireball. A remote-detonated IED had been planted on the support pillars. If they had stayed on course, they would have been buried under tons of concrete. "Ambush!" Xena screamed. "Contact rear!" The trailing SUV hadn't made the turn in time. It swerved to avoid the debris, slamming into a parked truck. "Grayson!" Felix shrieked. "It's Grayson!" From the shadows of the alleyways, gunfire erupted. It wasn't random street gang fire. It was precise, automatic suppression fire. Bullets sparked off the armored plating of Xena's SUV. "Go, go, go!" Orion yelled. The driver floored it, but a black garbage truck pulled out from a side alley, blocking the road ahead. They were boxed in. "Bail out!" Xena commanded. "We're sitting ducks in the car!" She kicked her door open, using the armored door as a shield. "Felix, move! Stay low!" Felix was frozen. He was hyperventilating, curling into a ball. I can't die!" Xena reached in, grabbed him by the collar of his vest, and hauled him out into the rain. It was a dark echo of what had happened in the bank lobby hours ago, her dragging him. But this time, she was dragging him to save his life. "Move your feet, Sinclair, or you die right here," she roared over the sound of gunfire. Orion was on the other side, returning fire with his service rifle. "They have high ground! Rooftops!" A bullet pinged off the pavement inches from Felix's foot. He screamed. "Get him to the warehouse!" Xena pointed to an abandoned textile factory across the street. "We can hold them off there!" They ran. It was a chaotic sprint through the rain and bullets. Xena shoved Felix ahead of her, keeping her body between him and the shooters. She felt a round tug at her sleeve, tearing the fabric but missing the skin. They crashed through the rusted metal door of the warehouse. Orion and the two front-seat agents followed, slamming the door shut and barricading it with an old forklift. Inside, it was dark and dusty. The sound of rain hammered on the tin roof, masking the sound of footsteps outside. "Status!" Orion barked. "Agent Miller is hit," one of the tactical agents said, clutching his shoulder. "Through and through. I'm good." "Where is the second team?" Xena asked, checking her magazine. "Radio silence," Orion said grimly. "They're gone." Felix was huddled in a corner, sobbing. "He sent Grayson. We're dead. We're all dead. You don't know what he is. He's a machine." Xena walked over to Felix. She loomed over him, water dripping from her hair, looking like an avenging angel. "Look at me," she demanded. Felix looked up. "You treated me like I was nothing," Xena said. "You dragged me. You humiliated me. You thought you had all the power." "I'm sorry," Felix wept. "I don't want your apology," Xena said, racking the slide of her Glock. "I want you to understand something. The woman you called trash? I am the only thing standing between you and a bullet in the brain. So you are going to sit there, you are going to shut up, and you are going to let me do my job. Because if you panic, if you run, if you make a sound, I won't have to kill you. Grayson will do it for me." "Why?" Felix whispered. "Why are you saving me?" Xena looked toward the door where the shadows were moving. "Because the badge isn't just a prop, Felix," she said. "It means I protect everyone, even scumbags like you." Orion signaled from the window. "They're breaching the east wall. Flashlights. 4 tangos." Xena turned to the darkness of the warehouse. "Let's welcome them." The hunters had entered the building, but they didn't realize they were locked in with the apex predator. And she had a lot of stress to work off. The interior of the textile warehouse was a labyrinth of rusted machinery, decaying looms, and shadows that seemed to stretch like oil slicks. The only light came from the lightning flashing through the high, broken windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the damp air. Xena crouched behind a heavy industrial press, her breathing controlled, silent. Beside her, Felix was shaking so violently his teeth were audibly chattering. Xena placed a firm hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "Breathe," she mouthed. "Do not move." Orion was 20 feet away, positioned behind a stack of rotting pallets. He flashed a hand signal. 2 tangos, flanking left. Grayson's men were professionals. They moved with the silent coordination of a wolf pack. But they were expecting a standard tactical holdout, agents cowering behind cover, waiting for backup. They weren't expecting Zena Beckett. She checked the magazine of her Glock. 7 rounds. Enough. "Come out, Felix!" Grayson's voice echoed through the vast space. It was calm, conversational, bouncing off the metal walls so it was impossible to pinpoint his location. "You know how this ends. You walk out and it's quick. You make me come find you and I'll take my time." Felix whimpered, clamping his hands over his ears. Zena picked up a rusted bolt from the floor. She waited for the thunder to rumble, masking the sound of her movement, and threw the bolt hard against the far wall. Clang! The bait was taken. 2 beams of tactical light swung toward the noise. "Contact right!" one of the mercenaries shouted. As they turned, Zena moved. She didn't shoot. She was too close for that. She surged from the darkness like a phantom. She caught the first man by the wrist, twisting the rifle barrel up as he pulled the trigger. Sparks showered from the ceiling as the bullets went high. In one fluid motion, she drove her knee into his solar plexus, grabbed his combat knife from his vest, and spun him around to use as a human shield. The second mercenary hesitated. That second cost him. Orion fired 2 controlled bursts. The second man dropped. Zena shoved the first man into a pile of crates, knocking him unconscious with the hilt of his own knife. 2 down, Zena whispered into her comms. "Impressive," Grayson's voice came from the catwalks above, "but sloppy." A single shot rang out from a high-caliber sniper rifle. The bullet didn't hit Zena. It hit the hydraulic line of the press she had been hiding behind moments ago. High-pressure oil sprayed out, slicking the floor. "He's toying with us," Orion growled, reloading. "He has the high ground." "Cover me," Zena said. "Zena, no, that's a suicide run." "He's not looking at the floor," Zena said, her eyes fixed on the rusted ladder leading to the gantries. "He's looking at the kill zone. Keep him busy." Orion nodded. He leaned out and opened fire on the catwalks, drawing Grayson's attention. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off the metal railings. Zena sprinted. She moved through the shadows, her sneakers finding purchase on the slick concrete. She reached the ladder and scrambled up, hand over hand, ignoring the burn in her muscles. She reached the catwalk level just as Grayson pinned Orion down with suppressing fire. Grayson was prone, his eye to the scope, completely focused on the floor below. Zena didn't yell. She didn't announce herself. She stalked forward, silent as the grave. She was 10 feet away when a floor grate creaked under her weight. Grayson spun around, abandoning the rifle and drawing a sidearm with terrifying speed. Zena was faster. She kicked the gun out of his hand, sending it clattering to the floor below. Grayson didn't panic. He smiled. He pulled a serrated combat knife. "Finally, I was hoping for something personal." He lunged. The fight was brutal. It wasn't the choreographed dance of movies. It was a desperate, ugly struggle for survival on a narrow metal walkway 30 feet above the concrete. Grayson was strong, trained in military CQC. He slashed at Zena, the blade catching her tactical vest, slicing through the Kevlar but missing the skin. Zena blocked a strike to her throat, grabbing his wrist. They locked eyes. "Domino pays better," Grayson grunted, trying to overpower her. "The Bureau pays injustice," Zena grit out. She didn't try to overpower him. She used his momentum. As he pushed forward, she dropped her weight and swept his leg. Grayson stumbled, his back hitting the railing. The rusted metal groaned. Zena didn't let up. She drove a palm strike into his chin, snapping his head back. Then, with a roar of effort that carried all the anger of the day, the bank, the drag, the disrespect, she kicked him squarely in the chest. The railing gave way. Grayson's eyes went wide. He flailed, grabbing at empty air. He fell. He crashed into a stack of empty cardboard boxes below, the impact cushioning the fall enough to save his life, but breaking his leg with a sickening crack. He howled in pain. Zena stood on the edge of the broken catwalk, looking down at him. She panted, wiping blood from her lip. "Orion," she called out. "Packages secured. Wrap him up." Down below, Orion emerged, gun trained on the writhing hitman. "With pleasure." Zena climbed down. She walked over to the corner where Felix was still curled up. She reached down and pulled him to his feet. "It's over, Felix," she said. Felix looked at Grayson, broken and handcuffed, then at Zena. He looked at the woman he had dismissed as a vagrant, now standing amidst the wreckage of a battle she had won. "You," Felix whispered. "You saved me." "I did," Zena said, holstering her weapon. "Now hold up your end of the bargain. Give me the ring." Domino Donovan stood on the balcony of his penthouse, watching the storm clouds clear. The city looked scrubbed clean, the lights glittering like diamonds. He checked his watch. Grayson should have called 10 minutes ago. "Mr. Donovan," Kensington said, his voice trembling. "The pilot is ready. The jet is fueled. We should leave. Now." "Relax, Kensington." Domino smoothed his silk lapel. "Grayson doesn't fail. The loose ends are tied. We're just taking a little vacation until the heat dies down." "Sir, the news..." Kensington pointed to the TV. Domino turned. The news anchor was speaking breathlessly. "Breaking news. A massive shootout in the industrial district has ended with multiple arrests. Sources say the FBI has taken the notorious hitman known only as Grayson into custody. And unconfirmed reports state that Felix Sinclair, the missing bank manager, is alive and in federal protection." Domino felt a cold pit open in his stomach. "Impossible," he whispered. "We have to go." Kensington grabbed his briefcase. "They'll be coming." "Let them come," Domino snarled. "They have nothing. Felix is a liar. The accounts are encrypted. Without the biometric key, that money is just random numbers. They can't touch it. They can't touch me." Crash. The double oak doors of the penthouse didn't just open, they disintegrated. A battering ram hit them with the force of a freight train. "FBI, get on the ground!" Flashbangs detonated, filling the room with blinding white light and a deafening ringing sound. Domino stumbled back, blinking tears from his eyes. Through the smoke, armored figures poured into the room. "Clear left! Clear right!" And then, walking through the haze like a nightmare, came Zena Beckett. She wasn't wearing tactical gear anymore. She was wearing a crisp, navy blue FBI windbreaker with bold yellow letters. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her bruise was dark and angry, a badge of honor. She walked straight up to Domino. "Domino Donovan," she said, her voice steady. "You are under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and the attempted assassination of a federal agent." Domino laughed. It was a brittle, desperate sound. "You have nothing, agent. You have the word of a disgraced bank manager. My lawyers will have me out before breakfast." "Will they?" Zena asked. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out a tablet. On the screen was a bank interface, a very specific offshore bank interface. "Felix was very helpful," Zena said. "He told us about the encryption." "It's biometric," Domino shouted, holding up his hand with the heavy gold ring. "You need this, and you'll never get it off my finger without a warrant that will take weeks to—" Zena smiled. "Actually, Felix told us it's NFC, near-field communication. It doesn't need to be on your finger. It just needs to be close." She stepped forward. Domino tried to back away, but Orion was behind him, grabbing his arms and pinning them to his sides. "Get off me!" Domino screamed. "This is assault!" Zena held a small reader device up to Domino's hand. She pressed it against the ring. Beep. On the tablet, the screen flashed green. Access granted. The numbers began to scroll. Millions of dollars, wire transfers to cartels, bribes to judges. It was all there. Domino stopped struggling. He stared at the tablet, the color draining from his face. We just froze $200 million, Domino, Xena said. And we just downloaded the entire ledger. You're not going on vacation, you're going to a supermax. She looked him up and down, her expression one of utter contempt. And by the way, Xena leaned in close, Felix says hello. Kensington, Domino yelled, looking for his lawyer. But Kensington was already on the floor, hands cuffed behind his back, weeping softly. Xena took a pair of steel handcuffs from her belt. She spun Domino around. You like dragging people? She whispered as she ratcheted the cuffs tight, tighter than necessary. Let's see how you like being dragged out of your castle in front of the cameras. 3 months later. The courtroom was packed. It was the trial of the decade. Domino Donovan sat at the defense table, looking smaller, older. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a drab prison uniform. Felix Sinclair took the stand. He looked different, too. He had lost weight. He looked tired, but he spoke clearly. He detailed every transaction, every bribe, every order Domino had given. He implicated himself, ensuring he would spend the next 5 years in a minimum security federal camp, but he burned Domino to the ground. When the verdict was read, guilty on all 42 counts, the courtroom erupted. Domino didn't react. He just stared at the table, a king without a kingdom. Xena watched from the back row. She didn't cheer. She just let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding since that day in the lobby. She walked out of the courthouse and into the bright afternoon sun. The press was there, a sea of microphones and cameras. Agent Beckett! Agent Beckett! How do you feel about the verdict? Agent Beckett, is it true you took down Grayson in hand-to-hand combat? Xena ignored them, pushing through the crowd. She wasn't interested in fame. She walked down the block, away from the noise, until she reached a familiar building. The Sovereign Capital Bank. It was under new management now. The sign out front had been changed. The gold leaf was gone, replaced by a more modest, welcoming logo. Xena walked in. The air conditioning was still crisp, but the smell of lemon pledge and judgment was gone. She walked up to the teller line. Kira Mercer looked up. She was wearing a manager's badge now. Her face lit up when she saw Xena. Agent Beckett! Kira beamed. I didn't think I'd see you again. I just came to close an account. Xena smiled, leaning on the counter. No one grabbed her shoulder this time. And to say congratulations on the promotion. I heard the board cleaned house. They did, Kira said. After the video, well, they had to change everything. We have a new policy now. Respect is the currency. Corny, I know, but it's a start, Xena said. And thank you, Kira lowered her voice. For the recommendation letter, the FBI reached out to me about a civilian analyst position. You have a good eye for detail, Kira, Xena winked. You saw the key when no one else did. We need people who actually look at people, not just their clothes. Xena turned to leave, but stopped at the door. She looked at the spot on the floor where she had been dragged. The marble was still the same, but the stain of the memory was gone. She pulled her hoodie up, the same charcoal gray one, now stitched and repaired. She pushed the doors open and walked out into the city. A city that was a little safer, a little fairer, because one woman refused to let go of her dignity. Karma hadn't just hit back. It had cleaned house. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly why you never judge a book by its cover, or a hero by her hoodie. Felix thought he was dragging a nobody. Instead, he dragged his entire criminal empire into the light. Domino thought his money made him untouchable. He found out that a gold badge and a righteous fury are worth more than any bank account. It's a brutal lesson in humility. Power isn't about who has the nicest suit or the biggest office. Real power is standing up when everyone is trying to push you down. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice served cold, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button until it turns blue. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, What would you have done if you were in Zena's shoes? Would you have saved Felix? Let's talk about it. Until next time, stay safe and treat everyone with respect. You never know who they might be.